the first bit of the webinar to Jennie MacFarland. And so she's going to be talking to us about purple martins. We tend to think of purple martins as nest box or gourd nesters in the east, but in the desert west, they can nest in saguaro cactus, I probably said that wrong, or other large columnar cacti. And this western subspecies has been largely understudied until the Tucson Audubon Society started their research. And so today we're going to introduce Jennie MacFarland, who is the bird conservation biologist for Tucson Audubon Society. She coordinates the Important Bird Areas program for Arizona and heads up several community science efforts like the Elegant Trogon Survey, very jealous about that, the Tucson Bird Count, and the Desert Purple Martin Project. So Jennie, it's all yours for right now.
All right, sounds good. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to be talking about desert purple martins. And first of all, what the heck are desert martins? So like Danielle said, if I know this is a Western group, but if you've ever been or grew up in sort of the Midwest or the Eastern United States, you'll probably be familiar with purple martins as nest box birds. They're very, very popular with the public. People love desert martins. It's not desert martins, purple martins, the eastern purple martins. They love them and will put nest box arrays up in their property. And they just have a huge amount of public support and just sort of public love from birders and also from non-birders. But I live in Tucson, Arizona. I'm an employee of the Tucson Audubon Society. And we are very lucky to be in Sonoran Desert habitat and have some really interesting, cool animals that live in Sonoran Desert. And one of those, I think now one of my new favorite animals here in the Sonoran Desert are the desert purple martins. And what are desert purple martins? And what they are a subspecies. So the purple martins, the Prosperus subis species, is actually divided into 3 subspecies. And this is a really good map that I scanned out of the National Geographic Birds of North America field guide. If you're looking for a map that shows where different subspecies of all sorts of birds of North America, where they are geographically from each other, this is actually quite a good resource. So I just want to give full credit. I did scan this out of that book, but this is showing the range of the 3 distinct subspecies, the recognized subspecies. You have pretty much the entire eastern half of the lower 48 states of the United States up into Canada are the subis. And that's sort of the eastern purple martin, kind of the primary purple martin, and the largest population by far of the 3. And then you have the arboricola, which is a really interesting subspecies as well of the West. And this is the forest nesting martins. These are also wild nesting martins that will use primarily aspen trees, but other trees as well, woodpecker cavities, and sometimes very, very high up in trees. So you can actually get these in Arizona as well, but this is more northern Arizona. So like in the Flagstaff area, if you see purple martins, these are going to be the arboricola subspecies. And they go all the way up sort of the Pacific Northwest coastal area. And I know groups have done like Audubon societies up in Pacific Northwest, like Washington State, have done nest box projects with these martins as well and had success. And this is going to be important later in my talk with putting up nest boxes that the martins of these arboricola martins will utilize, especially if they're put out on the beach with water around them, around the base. So they are also wild nesting martins, higher elevation in the West, that have been known to use nest boxes. And then you have the Hesperia, and these are what we call, and many people call, the desert purple martins, the Hesperia subspecies. And they have an extremely small breeding range. You can see here, it's very small. It's just a little bit of southern Arizona into Baja, California, and into extreme northwest Mexico I'm not sure what's going on here. I need to investigate that more here, a little further south in Mexico. And the reason it's so restricted, so yeah, here's where the Hesperias their breeding range, is the habitat itself. So desert purple martins, the Hesperia purple martins, are extremely restricted for their breeding grounds into Sonoran Desert. And more so, they're restricted even further than that, because I'm going to have another map in a second. They're not throughout the entire Sonoran Desert. They're in what's known as the upland Sonoran Desert. So you get the Sonoran Desert gets divided, at least in Arizona, it gets divided into 2 distinct types of Sonoran Desert. So if you've ever been up to Phoenix, That's the lower elevation Sonoran Desert, lowland Sonoran Desert, and it's much drier. It gets less rain than the Sonoran Desert you get around Tucson, which is upland Sonoran Desert. So the Sonoran Desert around Tucson area and south is much more lush, a lot wetter, and actually looks quite a bit different from the Sonoran Desert up in Phoenix. Now, they both have saguaros, which is the primary structure that these purple martins will nest in, but you don't really get purple martins nesting up in the Phoenix area. It's never really been documented in the Phoenix area. You'll get martins coming through there, but they're most likely the arboricola migrating through to go further north. So there's never been documented, saguaro nesting up in the Phoenix area. There's been some areas near Phoenix, like Tonto, where it gets a little more, has a little more resources, but they're mostly down here in the Tucson area, down into a little bit into Northwest Mexico. Now they're also in Baja. They nest down here in Baja, even though there's no saguaros, which this map is showing the range of saguaros, the green over the tan of the footprint of Sonoran Desert itself. But that'll be important in a moment too. So this is an eBird map showing where purple martins as a species. And when I'm dealing with eBird data, you can look at purple martin Hesperia data, but many birders don't necessarily put it in that way. They just put them in as purple martin. So I try to pull all the purple martins and restrict it then by time. So in July and August, which is when our desert purple martins primarily nest, which I'll have more detail on that later, this is sort of the range of where we're seeing them. They're here, not so much in Phoenix, but a little bit around Phoenix and heavily in the Tucson area with the lush Sonoran Desert habitat, a little bit down into Mexico, down into Hermosillo area, and then down here into the southern half of Baja. And in Baja, there are no saguaros, but there is a very similar, very closely related cactus species called cardones. Now, cardones are big. They're bigger than saguaros, but they look quite a bit like saguaros. And when I looked this up in a botany situation, they are actually pretty closely related to saguaros. And you have a very similar situation where you have Gila woodpeckers and gilded flickers also in this range, the cardones, and they also put holes in the saguaros, and the purple martins will nest in them. So they nest in Sonoran Desert habitat that's very lush, that has large columnar cactus, which is saguaros, which if the iconic saguaros of Sonoran Desert in Arizona, and the cardones of Baja. And that is it. Those are the only known nesting strata that anyone's ever documented for these desert purple martins. So in 2020, we decided to launch the Desert Purple Martin Project, which was really good timing, right? We decided this late in 2019, we were going to do this. And then, of course, 2020 went off the rails, but we still went ahead and did it because it was myself and Olia Weekly, who works here at Tucson Audubon, this Olia on the left photo here with the pole. We decided, okay, it's 2020, no meetings are happening at all. So we'll spend the summer that year. And we did. We spent the summer that year going out into Sonoran Desert and really trying to figure out how to study desert purple martins. Because unlike the eastern purple martins, where when they want to see what's going on inside a nest, they can take that whole flotilla of boxes that are often attached to like a flagpole situation or something similar, where they can lower them at will and then open the little door and see what's going on inside. That was not going to work, obviously, in Sonoran Desert habitat, where these birds are nesting in woodpecker holes. Anywhere we found heights of nests ranging from, I've had them as low as about 9 feet, which that's just a few that low I've found, up to 30 feet or higher up a saguaro. And it's like, how are we going to do this? So what we ended up working out was using extending poles, so lightweight aluminum utility poles. These are meant for like changing light bulbs in very high ceilinged rooms or something. So utility poles that extend, and wireless endoscopes that then link to a smartphone, and you can see on your phone what the little scope is seeing inside the cavity. Definitely took some practice that first year. I'm kind of glad we were out there in the desert by ourselves, flailing around trying to figure this out. But we got pretty good at it by the end of the season, and we're able to, and here's Olia here on the left with the pole and the little scope on the end trying to peek inside of a saguaro. They also have their own light on the tip, so you can see inside, illuminates inside. It was definitely some challenges. These birds do nest in July and August, and it's very hot in the Sonoran Desert out here that time of year. It's also monsoon season, so it's our rainiest time of year. We get a lot of rain, most of our rain primarily that time of year, which is why the martins are nesting right then, because insect abundance really goes pretty high right then. you're out there in the desert. We were worried about things like this black stuff on the soil here. This is cryptobiotic soil. We were really trying not to trample it. It's very delicate. It's very sensitive, especially when it gets in the monsoon season, when it's a little more wet. And dealing with things like rattlesnakes and cholla. And it was difficult, but we definitely figured it out how to do it in 2020. And we've been doing it every summer since. It's been a really cool project. So then in 2021, we did hold a workshop. We got our partners, Arizona Game and Fish, National Park Service, Pima County involved. We got all the permits we needed to do this. Even though we're not really like touching the birds, we still got a permit to like sort of, bother them by putting an endoscope in the holes and peeking at them. We trained a bunch of volunteers on how to do this. We bought extra equipment, did sort of like a loan checkout system. And by doing that, we got a lot more data, which was fun. Now here's a cool video showing what the martins are like. Oh, did I share it with sound? You're probably not hearing it, are you? Okay. I always forget to do that. Let me reshare with sound.
I think it was sound.
There was? Okay.
Yeah.
I switched the default because I kept doing that. But let's start it over. So this is a video I got in Saguaro National Park East of an active nesting saguaro and a flock of martins that were not happy to see me at all. And then the video goes on to see what was inside the nests. You'll see what the endoscope sees. Mama with her eggs. And then just the eggs after she left. 3 little babies on August 6th, 2020. And 3 bigger babies on August 17th. Okay. So it's pretty cool. You can see the quality of these endoscopes is actually pretty good. So we're able to get quite a good look at what's going on in the many saguaros we checked. So we're on year 4 now. I've definitely involved our membership, the public as much as I can through social media and Facebook to try to get people to help us report where these martins are and exactly what saguaros. We're up to over 160 like absolutely pinpointed saguaros that we know this exact saguaro, and many of them we know exactly which hole, at least that they nested in, the year they were being observed. It does move a little bit from what we can tell. But this is an ongoing project, and we're looking to get more and more saguaros reported. I do have an interactive map of this. So if you want to find any of the stuff I'm going to show, most of it's on the Tucson Audubon website on the Desert Purple Martin page. But this is a cool interactive Google My Maps that you can zoom in and on see, and then you can click on the pink saguaro icons and see a photo of the saguaro. It's pretty cool. So we're up to over 160 that we have identified for sure, and I have probably another 80 more that are more loose. Like, oh, there's a column. I see martins near here. And so then over time, we send people a follow-up to try to find them nesting. They don't like being watched, so it's actually can be kind of difficult to find the exact saguaro. So these are some of the images we've gotten of martins throughout the project. So we got mama with eggs, little tiny pink babies. And these nests, if you're familiar with Eastern martins at all, and I've seen a lot of information about them since, we're partnering with the Purple Martin Conservation Association out of the East. They look kind of similar, except the way they're putting leaves and grass and little sticks in the nest, but the strata, of course, looks quite different because it's a natural cavity inside of a saguaro. We've done a lot of aspects of our study with the Desert Purple Martin project here. Like we were documenting what direction the nest cavities face, because there's a lot of cavities out there, and they seem to pick really specific ones, and often that same cavity will get used year after year. So they do tend to track west. Over 72% were either from, northwest to southwest, some sort of westerly exposure. But then we did a little more research, and we found out that Gila woodpeckers primarily put the holes on the west side of the saguaros. So the holes are primarily on the west. So that kind of blew that one out of the water a little bit. But then we've been doing things like tracking the nesting timing, and it's not as synchronous as I would have thought, based on, because I would have thought when the rainfall comes, the humidity levels go high enough, that would be when they nest. We have found a fair amount of variation. It definitely clusters, like when they're laying eggs to when they're chicks of a certain age. but there's quite a lot of variability. We were having nests with eggs present as late as mid-August, and then most of them though sort of clustering in mid-July. So that's how the schedule most of them take is eggs by mid-July and then fledglings sort of by late August. But some track a lot later. So that was really interesting. We're adding to this data year after year. We tried to go out and prove that you could have multiple nests in a single saguaro. This had never been documented before. Desert purple martins are extremely understudied. There had been one graduate student in the late 80s that had done work on desert purple martins, working out of the University of Arizona here in Tucson. And it was Bridget Stoochberry's paper. It's a really good paper. And so she did 2 summers working on them. It's like 88, 89, and the paper came out in like 91, I think. And it was a good paper, but she didn't have a single documented instance of multiple nests per saguaro. Now they are colonial. You can see like how they were behaving when I was scoping the saguaro. They do come out and support their friends, but they don't usually nest right on top of each other like the eastern martins do. But we were able to document I was able to document 2 nests in a single saguaro, absolute proof because there's babies looking out of each hole. And then we saw different adult males going to the holes. There they are. There's a little baby looking out here and a baby looking out here. So that was cool. That was in 2021. We finally documented that for sure. Now this saguaro is going to be very important for the rest of the presentation. This is in Sal Rita, which is an area south of Tucson. It's known as Country Club 2. We have to name every saguaro that we document. So this one's called Country Club 2. I thought it had 2 nests in 2020. I confirmed it in 2021. And actually this summer we confirmed 3 active nests in this saguaro. So that was pretty cool. That was pretty great. And here we got two adults here. And on the same, so here's a male here, and you can see a little butt of another male out of this hole. And when I scoped both these holes in 2021, I found pretty big babies on this one and eggs in the other, in nest number 2 on the same day. So you can see there's quite a bit of variation in their timing. We have been working on a nest box project because this has to do with conservation goals, like what if all the saguaros burn down, which is becoming more of an issue out here in southern Arizona with invasive grasses that are really endangering cactus and saguaros. So we did a nest box design challenge, which was really fun. We did this sort of last year leading into this year, and we had a lot of entries. People submitted designs that they created. You are dealing with some really, really hot temperatures. You can't use a regular nest box. So we did a temperature study inside of the boxes that were all submitted, plus some sort of standard Eastern boxes, knowing they wouldn't work, but to show the comparison. And we also had temperature sensors inside of actual saguaro cavities. So we did a study on this, and we did find the sort of the top 3 winners, and we've made prototypes of those, and they're up for next year. Hopefully some martins will check them out and use them. So we are working on a nest box design concept as well. It's very difficult though, because it does get so hot out here in southern Arizona. I also had a live cam set up this summer on an active nesting saguaro. If you go to, and you see it's like a security camera, wireless streaming cam. It wasn't wireless. It was a live cam that we had on our website. And I have made a highlight video. It's only 6 minutes long. So if you want to see how that went, you can go to the Tucson Audubon YouTube channel and watch that video. It's really fun. You can see all the different stuff that happens with the martins coming and going to their nesting saguaro. It gives a good sense of what's going on. And there was 2 nests in that saguaro as well. So now more to sort of the banding part of what happened. So in 2022, we decided, it was the first time we tried anything like this. So Tucson Audubon doesn't have a long history of doing banding work, but we're getting more into it starting, I'd say, probably in 2022, starting last year, moving forward. So now we run a map station as well. So we're getting into banding now, but we did want, with help from partners. So Purple Martin Conservation Association, this is Joe here who works for that organization, runs it, who has extensive experience catching martins and banding them in the East, flew out and helped us. And we got all the permits and everything to do this. And we did mist netting in the middle of Sonoran Desert trying to catch purple martins. So this is the nesting saguaro, Country Club 2, that same one where we saw the eggs and the babies together. And we put these nets on the tops of the extending poles and had them out in the desert by the saguaros, hoping martins would fly into them. And the martins, they fly around because there's multiple nests in this saguaro. They're not happy that we're out there. So they're swooping around and, fighting, arguing and calling. So we did catch some in 2022. We caught 8 individuals. And so here's a photo of us catching one out of the net. So when a bird flies in the net, you have to lower the poles really quick and try to tilt the net down and get the birds out. So it was a real challenge for sure. It was very difficult. The nets more than once got caught in trees and thorns, and it was a real ordeal, but it was fun. And we caught 8, and then we did put some migration trackers on 8 birds. And there's a female. That's the very first one we caught and put a tracker on her. So then in 2023, so the hope was that they would come back to the same saguaro, and they did. I was watching this saguaro with great interest. And when the birds returned in May, I did see a male that was banded hanging out on the same saguaro. So that's him, that's the bird. And then we got some good photos, and you could see he's got a little tracker on his back. So then for the next 2 months, we were like, oh my gosh, this is great. He came back, the tracker. And I need to point out too that no one had ever put a tracker on a desert purple martin before. So we didn't exactly know where they wintered, what route they took on migration. It was a total mystery. So when this male returned, it was like so exciting. Then it's like, oh my gosh, we have to catch this martin again. We have to catch him and get the tracker off. So this was a drama for the next 2 months. And we tried everything. So there's a graduate student we're working with, Tori, up at NAU. And Tori came down from Flagstaff and was hanging out pretty much all of July and August. And we were really trying to catch this bird. So here's some photos from our different days' efforts. We had a hoop, like a butterfly net kind of on an extending pole, because we knew which hole he was going to. We knew which hole was his nesting hole that him and his mate were utilizing. And then we realized after a few weeks of really watching these martins like crazy that there was actually 2 males. 2 males had returned with trackers. We thought it was the same one when we'd see him, but then we got a better look and I saw 2 at one time, and it was actually 2 males that had returned with the trackers because we caught multiple martins at this saguaro. So both 2 males came back. But so then we knew which 2 holes the 2 males were using. It was this one here and this one here that Tori has the net on. And they're not stupid. They got caught last year the same way with a net. So we could not catch them this way because we'd like hold it back. And so then we tried a blind. So if you can see it here, but there's a brown little hunting blind down here with Tori hiding inside with the pole attached, sort of like strapped around the saguaro to hold it back. And so it wouldn't move. So when the martin would go in the hole, hopefully we could slam the net over it and catch him. Like this did not work at all. This did not work at all. We really tried though. And so then we broke out the mist nets and put up the mist nets. And after multiple tries of multiple mornings of doing this, you can see on the photo on the right, sometimes very, very early in the morning, trying to do this in Sahuarita, we were catching new martins. So we did put trackers on some new martins this year as well. But after many, many hours of doing this, we did finally catch one of the males we caught. So one of the 2 males that had a tracker, we did catch him in the net. I was holding the pole when this happened. Let me tell you, I have never sort of those seconds that extend out, those moments that extend out really long. I was just like trying to get the pole down without the martin escaping. Because sometimes when we're pulling it down, we had martins escape, but I was just like, oh my God. So we're like, I'm trying to put slack in it so, the martin can't get out, won't bounce out. And I got it down low enough. And of course I got it caught in like 2 trees, but we got it down and we could get the martin out successfully. And there he is with his little tracker. So he's got his little tracker on him. We did not catch the other male despite our best efforts. And but we got one, and we did download that data. Now we did catch, I think, 6 more this year. And hopefully that second male we never caught. The graduate students were telling me that the battery in that tracker could last another 6 months. So we may get, if we catch him again next year, we'll have maybe even more data. And we're also working on designing a better trap to try to catch them at their holes, because the butterfly net hovering outside the hole just was not going to work. It's just not going to work. They're not stupid. But we did download the tracker. I can't show an image of where the data showed because the graduate students are about to publish, but I can tell you that the wintering ground for the desert purple martin turns out to be northeast coastal Brazil, which is not what anyone thought. We thought it would be maybe further west than that. But yeah, it was extreme northeast Brazil is where it turned out this bird spent all winter of 2022 into 2023, and then migrated back north, sort of went due west through the Caribbean to come back, and went to Baja for a little while, and then came back up to Tucson area. So, Sahuarita, south of Tucson. So it was a heck of a saga, and Tucson Audubon is going to be doing more with this sort of technology and tracking. We're now doing some work with MODIS. We've put up 2 different MODIS towers. So I think we're going to be a lot more involved with the Western Bird Banding Association for sure from now on. So I do have some photos and sources here, and of course our partners with the Purple Martin Conservation Association, NAU, and then also we have had a grant from the Disney Conservation Fund, which is how we paid for most of this over the last 2 years. Certainly how we paid for the trackers. So yeah, does anyone have any questions?
So you can, there's not very many of us, so if you have a question, you can just unmute and ask it if you'd like. Or put it in the chat. Oh, I have in the chat. Will you do any workshops again?
On the scoping, yes. So we will be doing, and it'll probably happen, I think, in May or June in the Tucson area. We'll have at least one, possibly two, endoscoping workshops again. And then anyone who completes the training, I can then submit their names and information to Arizona Game and Fish to be added to our permit. So then you're permitted under Tucson Audubon's permit to do endoscoping through Arizona Game and Fish.
I had a question. Do the cacti with two nests in them, is it always two males, or do the males sometimes have multiple nests?
Oh, okay. Yes. So I've watched the martins that have multiple nests, those saguaros that have multiple nests, and watching them, it's always separate pairs. I think 5 saguaros I found that have multiple nests, you can tell just watching them. You'll see the males sitting up on different arms of the saguaro, and then the females coming and going, and the males coming and going. Yeah, I don't think they're doing sort of multiple nests per male or pair, or multiple females per male, anything like that. It does seem to be separate pairs that are just hanging out in the same saguaro.
Okay, so
is a question.
Okay, so you can see that good.
Yes, that's why I stopped showing my screen so I can see the comments. I'm trying to remember. I think they were, I know the ones we submitted, the ones we applied this year were the Argos trackers. So the new ones that are out now that we put on more martins this year are Argos. The ones we did before, I can't remember what they're called. They were called Trax, the Trax monitors, I think. They're the ones that use sort of the angle of the sun to track. So they're not as accurate as the Argos. But we weren't even sure that first year if the martins would even come back to the same saguaro. So we used less expensive trackers. The ones that are about $250 each are the ones we put out in 2022. They did come back, and we got that one off that male. But the ones we put out this year, we were hoping to do Argos trackers. We had a bit of a snafu with that, so the Argos didn't go out actually. But those are, which we'll use them next year. Those are in the, is it like $1,500 range? Very, very expensive, very expensive. And you do need special permits to do this for sure, federal permits. And we did all that with Joe. So Joe Sechrist from Purple Martin Conservation Association, who's used these devices on Eastern martins a lot, has a track record of it going well with the bird banding lab. With his help, with his permits, he flew out to Tucson to do this. We got permission to do it in Arizona, and then we had Arizona Game and Fish state permits as well that we had to get for this.
Thanks.
Well, why do you have 1D bands for Purple Martins?
What do you mean? The bands in the photo?
No, Pyle says you're supposed to use 1D bands. Why do you use those steel bands on the Purple Martins?
I don't know. I don't have banding experience. I don't have extensive banding experience, so I don't know the right answer to that.
Usually you put 1Ds on because of the wear of the band.
I'm going to speak to that. Well, so they're not necessarily steel. They're aluminum too. But they're just the right size. So sometimes it's just the right, 1A is too small, 2 is wobbly. So those 1Ds, they sit nicely in the right size.
So there are aluminum 1Ds?
Oh yeah, you can get aluminum 1Ds.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a question about your artificial nest box. When you put your artificial nest box up, what are you putting them on?
So what we did was we took the top 3 designs, like the 3 that performed the best in terms of our temperature study using iButtons, and we attached them, the 3, like we made like 25 replicates of those 3 designs. We put them on a crossbar, and then we put them on a really tall beam. So like a 2x4 that was like 15 feet tall. And then we put, cross legs that we attached cross legs to that. And there's actually a pretty good picture of that on our website. But yeah, it was a whole process of figuring out how to like pivot it up and then attach the cross legs to stabilize it. So they're on top of really tall beams out in the desert. We have them near areas where we knew there was martins nesting. So I think they saw them before the end of the nesting season this year. And we saw them checking them out. But we're really hoping that when they arrive next year, maybe they'll check them out and maybe even sort of go in and out and maybe even use one. Who knows? Now, the nest boxes, the top 3 performing nest boxes still did not do well as saguaros in terms of buffering temperature changes. They didn't. So I don't know if they're going to work, but we certainly have the best we could come up with out there for the birds to tell us if they think it's good enough.
Cool. And one last question about your trackers. Have you thought about MODIS? This is always my question these days. So
Yes. So Tucson has getting more and more involved in MODIS. We've now put up 2 MODIS towers ourselves. We have one in Patagonia and one in Tucson, and we're hoping to do more. We have not put MODIS tags on martins yet. The Southwest area just doesn't have enough MODIS towers for us to use it yet. But we're trying to, sort of a chicken and egg thing. Well, I don't want to use a tag because there aren't any towers. Why don't I put any towers up? Because no one's doing a project out here. So we have been putting efforts into try to get towers up without really having a MODIS study of any kind at this point. But at this time, there aren't enough towers up. So we've put up 2 and are part of the Arizona MODIS working group trying to help get more up.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jenny. I thought that was fascinating. I really did. I loved your story. It was great storytelling. So